The theater lights dimmed as the audience settled into their seats, the familiar hum of anticipation rippling through the room. America's Got Talent had seen countless performers walk onto that stage, some confident, some terrified, some unforgettable. But no one expected that the next contestant would be a quiet 13-year-old Filipino boy with a voice strong enough to bring back a legend. Backstage, the boy stood nervously, fingers gripping the microphone so tightly his knuckles turned white. He was small, with gentle eyes and a shy smile that flickered on and off like a wavering flame. Crew members moved quickly around him, but he barely noticed. His heart was pounding too loudly, a steady drumbeat of fear and excitement. "It's okay," his mother whispered, squeezing his shoulder reassuringly. "Remember what Lolo told you. Sing with your heart." Just the mention of his grandfather brought a sting of emotion to his eyes. Lolo was the one who had introduced him to Elvis Presley. It started on a rainy afternoon in their tiny living room in the Philippines. The old radio crackled with static until suddenly Elvis's voice filled the air, warm, deep, powerful. His grandfather tapped his foot to the rhythm, smiling as the boy's eyes widened in wonder. "Anak," his grandfather said, "this is a voice that changed the world." They spent countless afternoons singing together, the boy imitating every tone, every run, every soulful note. Even after his grandfather passed away, he kept practicing, because singing Elvis made him feel like Lolo was still there, cheering him on. And now here he was, thousands of miles from home, ready to honor the man who had taught him everything. A stagehand lifted the curtain. "You're next." His breath caught in his throat. The stage looked enormous. Endless rows of seats, cameras in every direction, lights so bright he could barely see the judges' faces. The host gave him a gentle nod. "Go show them what you've got." He stepped forward. Each footfall echoed in his ears like thunder. The audience watched curiously as he walked to the center of the stage. Many smiled, but a few whispered among themselves, clearly doubtful. He seemed too young, too fragile, too shy to take on a voice as iconic as Elvis Presley. "Hello there," Heidi greeted warmly. "What's your name?" He swallowed hard and introduced himself, his voice trembling slightly. When they asked what he would be singing, he lifted his chin and replied softly, "An Elvis Presley song." The reaction was immediate. A ripple of surprise traveled through the crowd. Some eyebrows shot up. A few chuckles could be heard from the back rows. Even the judges exchanged glances. Simon leaned back in his chair, studying him. For a second, the room felt colder. "Elvis?" he repeated, trying to understand how such a gentle, quiet boy planned to perform one of the most powerful voices in music history. A flicker of uncertainty passed through the boy's eyes, but he stood firm. He wasn't just there to sing, he was there to keep his grandfather's memory alive. "Okay," Simon said finally, "let's hear it." The music cue was given. For a heartbeat, the theater fell silent. The boy closed his eyes. In that split second, he imagined his grandfather beside him, smiling, tapping his foot to the beat, telling him that legends live not in voices, but in hearts. And he believed it. The first note of the instrumental rolled in, soft and steady. His hands trembled, his breath shook, but something inside him shifted. He felt the familiar warmth of his grandfather's presence. He inhaled deeply, lifted the microphone, and prepared to sing. And in the stillness of that moment, before a single note escaped his lips, the entire room could feel that something special was about to happen. The music began with a soft, familiar strum. Gentle at first, the kind of melody that floated quietly into the air like a whispered promise. The boy's heart hammered in his chest as he stood alone on the massive AGT stage. Every spotlight pointed at him, every eye watching, every breath in the theater drawn in anticipation. His world had shrunk to a single trembling moment. He lifted the microphone closer, swallowed, and began to sing. The very first note escaped him like a spark breaking free from a flame. Soft, warm, and unexpectedly rich, the tone vibrated through the theater, pure and hauntingly familiar, carrying a depth no one expected from a 13-year-old. The sound wrapped around the audience like a wave, gentle yet powerful, and instantly the room changed. A hush fell. The judges' expressions shifted. Heidi's lips parted slightly. Sophia leaned forward. Howie blinked, stunned. But Simon froze. His skeptical expression, the one he wore so often when contestants chose iconic songs, dissolved. The crease on his forehead softened. His eyes lifted, studying the boy with a sudden seriousness that carried weight. because he heard it too. That tone, that timbre, that echo of something timeless. It wasn't just singing, it was a voice reborn. The boy didn't know any of this. He only knew that his heartbeat was slowing, calming, settling into the rhythm of the song. He felt his grandfather's presence like a warm hand on his shoulder, steadying him. Each line he delivered carried the years of nights spent practicing in a tiny living room back home, the nights where he'd close his eyes and imagine stepping onto a stage like this. He was living the dream he had once whispered into pillows. But only 10 seconds into the song, just as he was finding his footing, Simon lifted his hand. "Stop," he said sharply. The music cut instantly. The boy froze mid-breath, eyes widening. His stomach dropped, crashing through him like a stone through water. The room erupted with murmurs, confused, tense, even frustrated. Stopping a performance so early was almost always a bad sign. He lowered the microphone without realizing it, suddenly unsure of everything. Had he made a mistake? Had he chosen the wrong song? Was he not good enough? He looked at the judges, his throat tightening painfully. Simon leaned forward, elbows resting on the desk, staring at him with a depth that made the boy's knees feel weak. "Can you say your name again?" Simon asked. The boy stuttered it out, his voice small. Simon nodded slowly. "Right. Okay." He took a deep breath, then continued. "I just want to be sure I'm hearing this correctly." The audience quieted instantly. The tension was thick, stretching across the room like a held breath ready to snap. "Let's try something," Simon said. "Can you sing that last line again, but this time, sing it without the music?" The boy blinked, startled. Acapella? He felt completely exposed. No instruments, no melody, no safety net. Just his voice echoing in the vast silence. His hands trembled. His chest tightened. He felt the weight of the entire world pressing down on his small frame. But then he remembered the words his grandfather used to whisper, "When you sing, Anak, don't be afraid of silence. Silence makes the soul louder." He inhaled shakily. Simon nodded. "Whenever you're ready." The theater was so quiet he could hear someone coughing in the distant balcony. He raised the microphone again, lifted his chin, and closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his eyelids, his grandfather's smiling face appeared, soft, comforting, warm. He opened his mouth. The note that came out was smoother than silk, strong yet delicate. Without the music clouding it, his voice filled every inch of the auditorium, soaring up to the rafters and down to the deepest rows of seats. Every breath he took, every slight vibrato, every emotion-laced tone, it was all raw, real, and breathtaking. It wasn't a child singing, it was an old soul speaking. The judges sat frozen, shock evident on their faces. Heidi felt goosebumps rise along her arms. Sophia placed a hand over her heart. Howie's eyes softened with admiration. Simon didn't move. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were shining. Midway through the line, the boy's voice cracked faintly, not from weakness, but from feeling. And somehow, that single imperfect moment made the entire performance even more powerful. It was vulnerable, human, heartfelt. When he finally finished the phrase, the last note lingered in the air like smoke dissolving into the night. Silence. Then, a gasp from the audience, a scattered clap, a few cheers. And suddenly, like a wave crashing forward, the entire crowd rose to their feet, a full standing ovation. The boy stared in disbelief, tears welling in his eyes. He couldn't understand what happened. How had everything changed so quickly? A moment ago he thought he was being rejected. Now the crowd was cheering louder than he had ever imagined. He blinked at the sea of faces standing, applauding, shouting, whistling. He had never been applauded like this before, not even in school. He was overwhelmed, stunned, lost for words. When the applause finally softened, Simon leaned into his microphone. "Do you know how rare that is?" he asked. The boy shook his head silently. "That voice," Simon began, pausing as if choosing his words carefully. "It didn't just sound like Elvis." He pointed at the boy with an intensity that carried across the stage. It felt like Elvis walked into the room again. The audience erupted in cheers. The boy covered his mouth with his hand, shaking. His mother backstage burst into tears, clutching the edge of the curtain. Simon continued, his voice quieter now, almost reverent. I've heard thousands of singers. Thousands. And what you just did, especially at your age, is extraordinary. You made all of us feel something real." The boy wiped his eyes, overwhelmed, trembling, unable to speak. Simon smiled softly. "Thank you for that moment." The boy let out a tiny breath, a mix of relief, disbelief, and pure emotion. For the first time in his life, he realized he wasn't just singing Elvis. He was honoring him, channeling him, carrying him forward, and it had taken only 10 seconds for the world to see it. The theater fell into a stunned hush. The boy stood frozen on the stage, tears trembling at the edge of his lashes, his small hands still wrapped around the microphone. The audience was still standing, still cheering, still buzzing with disbelief at what they had just witnessed. But the loudest silence came from the judges' panel, specifically from Simon Cowell, who had leaned back, eyes locked on the boy with a mixture of awe and something almost emotional. He wasn't finished. He leaned forward, pressed both palms onto the desk, and slowly rose to his feet. The crowd reacted instantly, shouts, screams, clapping, because when Simon stood up, everyone knew something huge was coming. The boy's breath hitched. Simon crossed his arms, studying him for a long moment, not with judgment, not with skepticism, but with something deeper, respect. "You know," Simon began, his voice steady but softer than usual, "every once in a while someone comes on this stage and reminds us why we love music in the first place." The audience quieted, hanging on every word. "You didn't just sing," Simon continued. "You told a story, you connected, you made us feel something." He paused, looking almost moved. "And that doesn't happen often." The boy placed his hand over his heart, overwhelmed. Simon exhaled slowly, nodded once, and reached toward the center of the judge's desk. The entire room leaned forward. The boy's eyes widened as realization hit him. This was happening. This was really happening. Simon pressed the golden buzzer. A powerful explosion of gold confetti burst from both sides of the stage, raining down like a shower of dreams. The boy gasped, covering his face with both hands as his knees nearly buckled. The sound in the theater was deafening. Cheers, whistles, screams, applause echoing against every wall. He looked up into the storm of gold, tears streaming freely now. His tiny frame trembled as he released the mic and let out a shaking breath, overwhelmed by the moment he had always imagined but never truly believed could happen. Backstage, his mother cried out in joy, pressing both hands to her mouth as tears fell uncontrollably. Crew members stepped aside quickly as she rushed onto the stage, calling her son's name. She wrapped her arms around him, pulling him into a tight, emotional embrace. He buried his face in her shoulder, the confetti sticking to his hair and cheeks, his body shaking with sobs of shock and happiness. The music swelled, filling the arena with triumphant chords. The confetti glittered in the lights like stardust, sticking to the boy's clothes as though crowning him the moment he had fought for all his life. Simon stepped onto the stage, brushing a piece of gold paper off his jacket and approaching the boy with a proud smile. He waited until the boy looked up, eyes red but shining. "You," Simon said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, "did something extraordinary tonight. You brought a legend back to life. That's not just talent. That's magic." The boy trembled, unable to speak, his voice lost in emotion. Simon bent down slightly so they were eye level. That was one of the most stunning auditions I have ever seen. He gave the boy's shoulder a squeeze. "And your grandfather, wherever he is, I promise you, he's proud." The boy broke into another wave of tears. His mother hugged him tighter. Simon gave him one last smile before stepping back toward the judge's table, but his words lingered in the air like a blessing. The boy stepped forward slightly, looking out at the cheering crowd. He didn't see strangers. He saw light, hope, love. He saw the home he missed, the nights he practiced, the old radio crackling through Elvis songs, his grandfather's laughter echoing in his mind. In that moment, he wasn't just a shy boy from the Philippines. He was a star, a rising voice, a legend reborn, a reminder that passion can transcend time. As the confetti continued to fall around him, he lifted his hand gently toward the sky, as if reaching out to the man who taught him everything, and whispered, "This is for you, Lolo." And the theater erupted all over again.